You are listening to the BBNI podcast, Journeys of Faith, Leadership and Life.
Welcome to the BBNI podcast. I'm David Penny, Engagement Officer and Training Lead at BBNI. At the heart of BBNI is one big message of hope. We long for our children and young people to know, love and follow Jesus. The BBNI podcast is about engaging in conversations about how we can share that message of hope as BB leaders, but also how we can live that out in our faith and our everyday lives. So if you're listening to this podcast during your commute to work, I hope there's no terrible traffic, or if you're more like me, listen to this podcast as you load the dishwasher. Wherever you join us from today, our hope and prayer is that it's a time of blessing together. I'm here with Andy Lamberton, who is the Director for Legacy and Ministry of Exodus. Hi, Andy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. It's great to have you on the podcast. To get us going, I suppose a good way of starting is getting to know you. So who is Andy Lamberton?
Yeah, well, it's a real delight to be here. Thanks, David, for having me, and love the work of BB. Really commend you for all you do. It's absolutely tremendous, and I'm taken by your heart. And who am I? Well, one, I've got two boys that go to the BB.
That's great.
So Peter and Matthew, and they love it. And I've got two girls as well, Sarah and Hannah, and one wife, Debbie. And so together we're raising them along the Donegal shoreline in the Republic of Ireland. And we go to a wee church, Fawn Presbyterian. And yeah, that's more or less me, I would say.
That's lovely. And I think I've recently confessed this to you. I've never been to Donegal, so I'm in the bad books at the start of this. But
well, there's always a step.
Yes, I will. I'll be able to add that to my list of holiday destinations, maybe. But yes, sometime maybe I will get to Donegal. But yes, and great to hear a wee bit about you, and then a wee bit about work life. Like, what have you done?
Yeah, well, I grew up as a farmer, and then I kind of was commissioned into youth ministry, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Came through a young fella, Matthew Baskin, who had a camp, just said this line to me. He said, every year we fall away from faith. You meet with us through the year. And really, I look back on that as my commission in the disciple-making youth ministry. And then as a result, ended up meeting Exodus. And I was just, it was meeting folks who were passionate about discipling young people, and who had the skill and the welcome to bring me in. I knew nothing. I was just I was about to say I was just a farmer, and then I stopped myself and never say that line.
Never.
But anyway, what I mean was that I was completely untrained, knew nothing about youth culture, any of that stuff. I just had a fire in my heart. I knew that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life. And I wanted to see that impact on those young people and to see them begin to follow Jesus. And so kind of led my first Exodus team in 2008 and volunteered for them really since. Met my wife then.
Wow.
She was leading a team as well from Derry and me from Donegal. So I met my wife at that first training, and then moved from the farm into vocational youth ministry in 2014 then. So kind of was doing Bible college part-time, kind of volunteering with youth ministry in Donegal part-time, and then I moved into vocational in 2014. So I've been leading the work of Exodus Northwest then kind of up until about a year ago. And then last year we launched Legacy, which is a new ministry coming out of Exodus for fathers. Yeah, so that's kind of the new adventure, but still very much a part of Exodus, and love the church, love to see the church thrive.
Yeah, and it's been really, really great to hear about this new exciting ministry, Legacy, and just to lead on to that, I suppose thinking about, obviously we're the Boys Brigade, so we work across all of Northern Ireland with over 11,000 young people and lots of boys there. What's through your research and experience with Legacy? What does the landscape look like for boys or young men, and their relationship with church? Obviously, BB exists within the church; it's a part of the church, but more wider. What does the landscape? What have you learned?
Yeah,
it's a big question.
Well, yeah, and So if you're listening, obviously you're listening if you heard that. But hear me out, because the start of this is a negative part. And I don't want to be someone who focuses on the negative, but because as I have, particularly over the past wee while, as Legacy has been launching, I've got to see a lot of different churches. I have to tell you, my overall observation is overwhelmingly positive. Do not believe the mantra the church is on the way out. That God is doing amazing things across this island, and BB, you're very much part of that. Part of what God is doing. But to take you back to maybe what stirred my heart to begin something like Legacy, which isn't just a ministry for fathers and sons; it's for fathers and daughters as well. But the start for me actually was I noticed the lack of boys at everything I was leading. So I helped, or at that point I was helping churches in the Northwest and Derry and Donegal do youth ministry. And every event, every Exodus team, every small group, every youth fellowship was more girls than boys.
Yeah.
And so that's I suppose the negative story that I have to share. And I thought to myself, why is it for such a sustained period of time? And then I looked at our own figures within Exodus, and Exodus, we're hoping that more girls would join our staff team, but we're a mostly male staff team whenever I made this observation. And Exodus has a fair sense of adventure. And, surely if there's programs that can attract young boys or young men, in our case, we work with 15 to 25-year-olds. But, I was like, surely we would attract at least a 50-50 ratio. And yet even in our Exodus teams, it was tilted as well. And so I love to see all the girls that are coming in, absolutely fantastic. And I wondered, what is it then that's stopping? And I suppose as someone passionate about the gospel taking root in young lives, I thought, who has the defining voice in these young men's lives, and how can we form a program where they get to speak to them? And then it became blaringly obvious. I thought, it's their father. He is the defining voice, or a defining voice in their life. And could we form, so this is me thinking, could we form a program where fathers would speak, gospel truths to their sons? And of course, that happens right across the board. Christian dads, I've got into this work, there's a lot of amazing dads that never get the headlines, but love their children well and explain the story of God well within their homes. But I suppose as we thought that through, I thought, wonder could we do, and I was thinking, could we do an Exodus team? You don't know what an Exodus team is. It's a mission trip in the summer, really, or a discipleship trip. And then we have a discipleship process before that. So it's like we would call it a small group adventure. But you have kind of from February to June, you have a discipleship process, meeting around scripture, Bible, connected to a church, that kind of thing. And then in the summer, we go off to Romania, Uganda, Donegal, or wherever.
I must sign up for a team then if there's a Donegal team.
Absolutely. So I thought, could we do a team that would be like fathers and their sons? And, would that provide a wee bit of a focus for us? I kind of pitched that to the Exodus, or members of the Exodus board. And I called it the Exodus Father and Son Award at that point. Thought we'd kind of rebrand it, not as a team, but as an award scheme. And then at that meeting, they were really taken, not so much by my idea or my title, but by the concept of it. And they thought, we think there is actually an organization or a movement here that we can be part of. We think that we could help provide programs for churches that helps faith and fatherhood thrive. So I got a whole heap of observations behind all that. I don't know if that gives you
No, and we could probably talk for a very long time about it. There's so much. And
there's maybe another. I chose to tell the story of Legacy there whenever you asked me about the church and boys, but there's a whole raft of other observations around So one, I just want to give confidence. There is
Yeah.
nothing the world offers today that beats what Jesus offers when he says, come follow me. It is the best life for boys. Without, you know, don't believe the lies that boys aren't interested either. It's just not true. And yes, you know, you can look, oh, we're getting more girls than boys at most things. You can look at all that, but you know, fundamentally, this is good news for boys. Jesus loves them and is calling them into a life of adventure and purpose, and the gospel is as true for them as it is for anyone. And so, you know, let's go get them. And but I do think, given the observations that have set out there from my time in youth ministry, I do think we need to focus, maybe think a little differently about how we reach boys, particularly if there's no Christian heritage at all, and how we bring them into the body of Christ. And would they join a choir in their spare time? You know, some boys would, so let's put on a choir, but a lot of boys won't. And so maybe bring them into something that's singing. You know, might have to rethink that a little bit or whatever. But I mean, I love singing, but I think people who are listening will get what I'm trying to say there, that we need to think maybe a little bit more creatively about how we draw, in terms of evangelism, how we draw more boys into meeting a Christian, reading the Bible for a first time, engaging with God in prayer, those kind of, let's see a good number of firsts happening in young boys' lives so that we can introduce them to God and they can begin walking with him.
Yeah, and I think from a BB angle on that, certainly, you know, we have, you know, lots of boys coming to our churches across Northern Ireland, and a lot of the work that we've been doing is how do we then embrace that further? How do we take that further? How do we link in with parents, and how do we, you know, how do we embrace them further into the church? You know, and BB obviously is a draw for a lot of people because there's a generational connection. You know, or there's a friend that brings someone that maybe would never have come to BB before. So there's an attraction there, but it's how we embrace that and how we simply get back to that. I totally echo what you're saying there. Our young people simply need Jesus, and how we portray that, whether that's through role models, examples, or, you know, through programs. There's so many different ways. The role of parents, obviously, we're both fathers. We know the importance of loving and caring and doing everything we can, and, you know, how we model our faith to them. As Christians, we want our children to grow up knowing and loving Jesus. But within BB, we have leaders who serve God, and likewise in our churches, obviously, there's biological parents, I suppose, the way to look at it, like, you know, with kids. But as leaders, what's the role there? What's your thoughts on that?
So what's the role of parents within this?
Yeah, but do you think there's a role model in the sense of, like, not just us with kids, but actually all of our leaders out there, whether they're serving in BB or Exiles or whatever? Is there a role of leaders being fathers or parents of the church, I suppose? Or
I think the answer to that, I'm going to tell. And I've told this story in a number of churches that I've spoken in, but it's a genuine observation, and I think it points to the role of father figures and fathers within the church, and parents in general. So we have a project up in the Northwest called Bible Reading Together, and we do it in schools. So we'll go in, and really our aim is that we want to see young people reading the Bible with a Christian. Really, that's the win for us, and it does great things for the school in terms of literacy. It helps introduces them to a gospel that they'll study at RE, and all of that. But anyway, we were in a school in the Northwest. We were reading the Bible with 920 pupils. The way we split up the class is there's normally 4 or 5 of volunteers like me, and then there's one kind of class facilitator. And so normally the men volunteers go with the boys and the women volunteers go with the girls. And so I always had a group of maybe 4 or 5 boys that I was reading Mark chapter 1 with. So the class is quite simply that you read the Bible with them. So it's not Bible teaching, it's not Bible explaining, it's just Bible reading. So anyway, chapter was introduced, and then we read the Bible, and then there's a couple of questions at the end of the class. One of them is, what do you want to remember from the passage? We're in all week, Monday to Friday, and on the Wednesday, one of the other volunteers said, "You noticed all the young boys are given the same answer to that question." And I hadn't up until that point noticed. I was just going class by class in the rhythm of the school. But from Wednesday morning to Friday afternoon, I paid attention, and I have to say, in my small groups, every time, and now only one out of the 4 or 5 would answer, but every time that question was asked, the same answer was given. What do you want to remember from the passage? So Mark chapter 1, like the rest of Mark, reads like a screenplay. It's just kind of action, action, action. So Mark gives his opinion at the start. This is the beginning of the good news, Jesus Christ the Messiah. Then we meet John the Baptist. He's eating locusts and wild honey. Then there's the baptism of Jesus. Jesus has his first sermon, repent and believe the good news. He calls his first followers. And there's someone who's possessed by a demon and lepers. And there's someone suffering with leprosy, I should say. And other people who get healed as well. And every time I ask the question, what do you want to remember from the passage? The answer, and it would always happen where the boy was quite nervous to share. This is year 9 to 11. Year 8 to 11. What they wanted to remember was what God says about Jesus after he's baptized. This is my son, my love, I'm well pleased. And so if you're involved in leading a BB, I want to tell you that boys are, they're crying out for the gospel, because in that sentence, you have described a right relationship with God. Jesus was one with the Father, and we have the voice from heaven saying, I'm well pleased with you. And ultimately, because of our sin, that's what we're all longing for. We're longing to be made right with God. And I think as these first-time Bible readers heard this described on a page for them, their inner selves, their inner souls said, that's what life's all about, a right relationship with God. And so they voiced it. I also think that it's an observation that points to the lack of affirmation in our society. And as these boys heard the words, this is my son, whom I love, with you I'm well pleased, I think something in their souls said, I wish someone said that about me.
Yeah.
It's not to say that every boy in this school didn't have good parents, but it is a genuine observation, and it's an absolute one from I started paying attention.
Oh yeah.
And now it didn't happen.
Very powerful.
It didn't happen in the next school, just for context.
Yeah.
But there was something about the honesty, and I think even that age group is a wee bit more honest whenever they're reading the Bible, and that's what they wanted to remember. And I think for us to bring it round to why I shared the story for your question.
Yeah.
What should we do as father figures? I think we should affirm.
Yeah.
I think we should call out what we see that's good in the boys that we serve and who we lead. Say, I see that in you. Just want to say I'm really pleased with you. I'm proud of you. I want to encourage people who are not biological fathers to say that they're proud of folks as well. Be careful saying whom I love to boys that are not your own children, but I think that I'm proud of you, or with you I'm well pleased, or you done a great job today, or I noticed you being kind to that other boy or that new person who came into your BB, whatever it is. Call that out and tell them that, saw that. I just want to tell you that was a great job. And it's not that you're in competition with other father figures in their life, but you may well be one of the few voices that affirms them in the faith and that affirms them in their giftings and their life as well. And so no BB have a comprehensive vision of how we raise and help young boys become men. And I think that's a huge part of it. And follow God's example. God could have said anything to Jesus there. He could have said, watch out for Judas, or he could have said, here's a 10-step plan for starting, whatever. I don't know. But if put yourself in that position, what would you say is, your son was starting the ministry, but he chose to say stuff that was fundamental, that was affirmative, that wasn't going to change. Jesus would always be God's son, whom he loved, with him he is well pleased. And at the Transfiguration, he repeats that line, only he adds, listen to him, speaking to the disciples at that point.
Yeah.
And I think there's something powerful there. So for BB, I wonder if this is like when your boys reach company section or about to graduate, you're looking around on the BB display night and you're saying, these boys are amazing. Give them roles in the church. You're affirming them
Oh,
in
yeah.
the company of other believers and saying, so God said to Jesus, or God said to the disciples, company of the disciples with Jesus there, that listen to him. And it's a bit like if a business gets passed on from father to son and the accountant comes in the day that it gets passed on, the father's still there, the accountant goes to the father and he says, no, you need to go to my son, he's the new boss. And like, what a moment for the son, and what a moment for Jesus there whenever God was saying you need to listen to Jesus. Anyway, I could get into all that.
That's incredible, and certainly, that's a very powerful way to think about that, and certainly something. There's takeaways for us all there. Exodus, an organisation known for modelling mentoring, and you've mentioned a wee bit about that model, in the run up to teams and discipleship, and you've been involved with them for many years, as you shared. You've just also penned a book, and you've got a book now that's out. Do you want to share a wee bit about your book that you've just released?
It's called Letters for Exiles, Faithful Living in a Faithless World. And the book is written, Daniel is the context.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah is actually the main text, because it's written from the perspective of who was Daniel's mentor and what advice would he have given him. So it's a little bit of a deep dive into that world. And it's written very much with late teens and adults in mind. I wrote it originally for two young lads who are going off to university, Adam and Jack. And I thought I wanted to write them letters. Then I wanted to video call them as well and see how they were getting on at university. Wow. And I thought to myself, I don't want to write them a letter and then call them and say, did you read my letter and what do you think? So I thought, can I do this from a more creative angle or whatever? And so I decided to write letters to Daniel as he was going off in exile, but really the letters were to Adam and Jack, and so anyway, that kind of deep dived me into a world of, what advice would Daniel have been given? And, how is this? And then that made me think of Jeremiah and how he was the prophet that prepared God's people for being godly in a foreign land and for the desolation of all that they knew. And so in the modern context, if you've listening to that and you think, what are you even chatting about? In the modern context, as Ireland, I live in the Republic, and it has experienced rapid secularization within a decade. And it looks like that's going to stay. And I don't think my small group skills are going to change that, and BB for its size, I don't know if we're going to change culture to the extent where we're not going to experience more secularization. And so I think we need to train our young people how to be godly in a secular world and how to follow Christ whenever those who are around us don't agree with us. And of course, that was Daniel's question as well. How do I remain faithful in a faithless world? So the book is a series of letters addressed to Daniel. And at the end of each letter, there's questions that you can kind of reflect on. And then there's 3 sections in it. So there's 3 time to discuss. You can actually read it for BB. You could read it with your company section, and then use the times to discuss as your kind of guide for whenever you're together, and then you read. So there's 3 sections. First section is about questions you should be asking. The second section is the foundations of the ancient paths. So what are the non-negotiables, if you like, of our faith? What is absolute about us as Christians, as God's people? And then the last section is called The Art of Living Free. It's a list of how-tos, things like how to pray for resilience, how to change the world, how to doubt, things like that.
Sounds like a good holiday read, or if you're flying away somewhere.
Yeah.
But certainly, do check that out, Letters for Exiles, and we'll include links on how people can get their hands on a copy of that. But you are going to generously give us 10 free copies, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Getting a giveaway in this podcast, it's great.
So I mentioned this to David just pre-recording. So I thought I could give away 10 copies. So we're thinking that people who email, do they have to email you or what?
Yeah, so if you email us just some feedbacks or thoughts of how you found our podcast, and then I suppose the first 10 in we'll
that's good.
We'll give them a copy.
So a bit of feedback, first 10 in, and make sure I give you the books after.
Oh yes,
so that you remember. But you'll have to give your. Who are they going to email?
Going to email me, but we'll include all that information on our website. Yeah, so it's probably
also have to look at that.
Yeah,
and
go to our website.
Make sure you include your address in the email, so we can get the books posted to you.
Yep. No. So that's great. Thank you so much for that, because there'll be 10 excited people out there now. So thank you so much for that. Just as we start to draw things to a close. You've mentioned legacy. We've chatted a wee bit about guys and meals in the church, and BB and how all of that. Would you be able to share with us a wee bit about how maybe BB could get involved with legacy? And I know we've had a few chats of how that could look, but just share a wee bit about. You shared a wee bit about an award there, but you've also got special days and things that you do as well.
Yeah. So Legacy is like a program provider for local churches, and I know each BB is connected to a local church, and so. We would love to provide programs for BBs, for churches. And we have 4 offerings, but I'll speak about one of them that I think will particularly suit BBs. So one of them's called a Legacy Day, and it's a day out with father, and for BB's case it'll be father and son, but they're also available for fathers and daughters. And it's a day out where you're shoulder to shoulder. We do something outdoorsy, maybe go for a bit of an adventurous hike or canoeing or that kind of a thing. Then we have dinner together, and then after dinner we're face to face, and so we think about some of the things, like maybe think about the future, maybe think about some of the foundations of our lives and that kind of thing. And it's a really good. So if you're listening and you're a parent yourself, what it does is it means that you're booking time with one of your children and saying that Saturday. I'm going to, go and we're going to spend those 4 or 5 hours together. And it also will help you. It's facilitated, not led. And so it'll help you have key conversations with them as well. So no conversations forced, but there's this kind of, now we're going to speak about the future, and here's 5 questions for you to consider here. And now we're going to think about the foundations of our lives as the world changes around us. What's not going to change about you? So in these Legacy Days in particular are anyone can do them.
Yeah.
People at the fringes of church would find them very easy to take part on. People who have faith right at the center of their home would find them a wonderful asset as well. So they're a great way to kind of reach out and to include parents. If you're a BB captain, it's a great way to include parents on a special day, So I suppose if you're interested, my email is andy@legacyfathers.org, or you can go onto our website and there's a little contact form that you can do there. That just comes straight into my email anyway. So I would be delighted.
It would be fantastic, and it's a great tool to use in BB, that you could get dads together and you could go on a trip, and it sounds really, really interesting. Something definitely to build those relationships with parents and the wider church, and how we can do that. So definitely do get in touch with Andy, and we would love and if you're doing that, certainly get in touch with us, and we'll support you too in that, and how we can maybe put you in touch with him. But it would be great to do that. So thank you for sharing that. There's lots going on. If you were, I suppose, as we bring things to a close, one piece of advice, if you were a bit younger, along the way, you've obviously told us a wee bit about your journey. But if there was one piece of advice you'd known when you were younger, what would that be? And that could be anything. That's a wide open question. You were doing it all again, Andy.
Well, there's so much I could say, but I've learned in these kind of questions, just pick one thing, because it's hard to remember more than one anyway. But I've I've really struggled to pray in my faith. And I've struggled that my prayers don't sound just like a shopping list,
Yeah.
And prayer is your relationship with God. I mean, that's how we talk to him, and he speaks back to us, through his word, through his spirit, and so on. But then I started a number of years ago, started praying the Psalms, and it just brought such life to my prayer life. And if I was starting youth ministry again, I would introduce praying the Psalms to young people sooner. And if I was living my life again, I would learn to pray scripture sooner. I'm 36, and it's only in my 30s that I discovered really praying the Psalms. Before that, they were just things to be studied or something like that, but actually to pray them out. And they're a bit, I describe them as a wee bit like the stars. The more you look, the more you see, kind of thing. And certainly in the Psalms, the more I've prayed them, the more I see in them, or the more they encourage me to engage with God in a straightforward, uncliched, matter of fact way. I know there's poetic Psalms, but a lot of them are quite straight talking. And so anyway, yes, I think that's my advice. Use the Psalms to pray.
Good. And what encouragement would you have for us? Maybe a word of encouragement for those 11,000 young people that attend BB every week, or the 2,000, over 2,000 leaders that serve faithfully. Is there a message for young people and a message for leaders who serve in Boys Brigade?
Yeah. You never miss out when you choose to follow Jesus. And the world tells you a lie, that the Christian life is restrictive, but actually it's sin that traps us, and it's God who frees us. And when you compare the Christian life to a non-Christian life, I mean, it is obvious, which is better, and it's obvious that following Jesus is the best. And so my encouragement for, if there's any boys listening to this, I want to tell you that if you choose to follow Jesus, you will never miss out. That following Jesus is always better. It's always worth it. He's always with you. And for BB leaders listening to this, I want to encourage you to have confidence in the gospel, that young people who you introduce to Christ, you're introducing them to someone who will love them their whole lives and see them through death and into eternity. I want to tell you, there's no greater role that you could have than to introduce young people to Christ. So keep it up, keep going, and know as well that He's always with you as you lead.
Thank you for that encouragement, and thank you for sharing with us today. It's been great to have you here, and there's just so much to unpack there, so much wisdom. So thank you for taking the time out and
You're welcome.
And joining us on the podcast. Remember, check out legacyfathers.org. We'd mentioned Andy's book as well there, Letter for Exiles, and also if you want to give us some feedback on the podcast, you're the first 10 that do that, then we can give you a copy of that book too. But do check that book out either way. But thank you so much for listening today, and thank you to Andy for joining us. We look forward to you guys join us next time, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the BBNI podcast. Subscribe to us on wherever you get your podcasts. We look forward to joining with you next time.